Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you.
Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm wonderfully well, thank you, Helen. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
I'm excited for our topic today.
Yes. So today we are exploring a topic that might come into the coaching room, and today it is meaningful purpose.
We've spoken before about how some people think coaching is all about goals.
Yes.
And the fact that we don't agree with that. It can be, but it's often about more. And so you do sometimes see coachees, clients, who feel that there's something missing and they want to lead a more fulfilled life.
Yes. And just going back to what we were saying about goals, I think goals could offer some meaning and some purpose to whoever is coming into the coaching room. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
No, absolutely.
It could be that goals are an important part of someone's own meaning and purpose.
And we also spoke a couple of episodes ago in episode 46 about the meaningful purpose Venn diagram, often described as Ikigai.
Yes.
So I word it that way deliberately.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure why, go back and listen to episode 46.
Well, and I think it's useful to explore Ikigai in the context of this episode.
Yes. So that was that as a Venn diagram that was designed around having meaning and purpose in your work.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the Venn diagram rather than Ikigai. So yeah, which is why we need to separate the two out.
Yes.
So yes, talk about your Venn diagram and then I'll talk about Ikigai.
So the Venn diagram that's often called Ikigai, but we will refer to as meaningful purpose Venn diagram, explores how you could find meaning and purpose in the work that you do by finding what you can be paid for, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs.
Yes. I think they describe it as what you love.
What you love, yes.
Your passion.
So those four things, where they intersect and merge. And I think a lot of our doctors, a lot of medical professionals, allied healthcare professionals, will find that they have meaning in their work. They might be frustrated by it, it might be impacted by things that are out of their control, but they will be good at the thing that they do, looking after people, diagnosing, surgery, their specialism. They'll love it. The world needs it, and they'll get paid for it. So a lot of them are in that place already.
I think that the bit that is often missing for them is the loving it.
Do you think that sometimes gets beaten out of it?
Yeah, well, and just maybe they've ended up in the wrong place. So obviously early on in their career they have to specialise and choose, and sometimes that choice is not the right choice, and sometimes that's about personality, that the personality doesn't quite fit the circumstances. Sometimes it is about actually their purpose is to help people, and the environment they find themselves in that specialism doesn't allow them to do that in the way they want to. So we've had someone come through our course who was insisting on 20-minute consultations in her practice. That's how she wanted to be because she was dealing with complex issues and disadvantaged people. So she felt she needed 20-minute consultations. Ended up leaving the practice as a partner because the other partners didn't agree and they couldn't come to an agreement on how that was going to work. So there is someone with a meaningful purpose. She wants to help disadvantaged, predominantly women, and knows how to do that and was good at it, but actually didn't love it because the environment was making it difficult for her. The environment was saying, no, you can't do that. So, yeah.
And, my mum was trained as a nurse, and I know from all of the things that she's done in her life that she was absolutely loved what she did. She was passionate about it. She was good at it. And we know the world needs nurses. In fact, when everything went into lockdown, we had a conversation where she said, I think I should go back to the hospitals. And you know, in her 70s, obviously that's not a good plan, but that passion was still there. That drive to help people was still there.
And I think, as you say, for a lot of doctors, that passion is there, but a lot of people that come to our coaching program and a lot of people that come into the coaching room are there for a reason. And quite often that reason is that the passion is dying and they've lost the connection with why they went into medicine in the first place. So I think as coaches, we can do good work in allowing people the time and space to explore that and what's going on for them. And it could be a contextual thing, it could be the environment. But equally, it could be that they've ended up in medicine without really intending to. We always get people on our course, we always get people to talk about their journey to where they've got to now. And quite often people go, well, I didn't really I wanted to be a vet, but then moved into medicine or, you know, they've just come through a different route. They've done well at school and gone to university, done well at university and then found their way into medicine without really thinking about it. That's quite a few people that have a creative side to them that really miss that. And that's perhaps where they started. That's where they thought they would go, but ended up in medicine. So I think it's possible for doctors to be in a situation where they are good at it, the world needs it, they're getting paid for it, but they're also very, very conscientious about doing a good job, but they don't actually love it.
And the pressures cause them to feel exhausted by it all.
And going back to that Venn diagram, so they might love it, the world still needs it, they're getting paid for it, but they might not be able to do as good a job as they want to do because of the constraints of the system. So a 10-minute consultation for a GP, for someone that's really passionate about delivering a meaningful conversation about someone's health, might really struggle with that.
Yeah.
So that as a Venn diagram, I think it's useful when people are perhaps contemplating their occupation to think about meaningful purpose in that sense of whether those 4 things are being fulfilled.
And I think it probably is important to say that we don't have to throw everything up in the air and change everything in our lives in order to feel that we have meaning and purpose. I've had clients who've tweaked some small things in their lives or have gained some new perspectives that has allowed them to feel they have or rediscover that meaning and purpose without making huge changes. So it's not always necessary to make a huge change. Sometimes it might be. No,
and I think, you know, doctors may well sacrifice the loving of the job for the fact that it's quite well paid. I think a lot of doctors would argue about that, but you know, they're on a good income. They are good at what they do, and the world needs it. So some people will say, well, you know, do I need to love my job? Is it possible? Should that be a consideration? So they might well carry on in the role that they're doing because those 3 things are there. And actually, I've got a friend who's a solicitor, a commercial property lawyer, who hates her job, but the money's good. She gets nice holidays. She's flying off to Mauritius and all over the place. Lots of Facebook pictures of her. But I know that she spends most of her waking life hating her job, which I think is a huge sacrifice to make. We only get one life. And if you spend most of your time at work doing a job that you hate. And interestingly, I was at a tennis social event and got chatting to one of the other tennis players who turns out she's a lawyer too, who hates her job.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And she was in conversation with another lawyer at that event who hated her job. Maybe something about lawyers.
Well, I have a friend who's a coach who is also a lawyer, and she coaches lawyers
who hate
their jobs.
Yeah. So, and I think that is a huge sacrifice to make, to have some meaningful purpose if you hate it. I think having a purpose in your life, I think it was Nietzsche said, the person who has a why can cope with any how. So that, you know, the fact that we will tolerate an awful lot if we've got that sense of meaningful purpose. But it seems like there's a difference between, I think, facing adverse circumstances and being in a difficult context, but actually still loving what you do and feeling like you're doing great work, having an impact, to actually just hating the work that you do. I think there's a difference there. So David Knott, who's a surgeon, the war surgeon, he wrote a book called The War Surgeon. He goes out to war-torn countries. So he was in Syria for quite a while, Bosnia when that was a thing. So he will go to those war-torn countries and operate in really dire circumstances where hospitals are being bombed. He trains doctors. He's now got a foundation that trains up surgeons in those countries so they can return and do that good work. So there's someone who's putting himself at risk, is in harm's way in order to do what he sees as his meaningful purpose. And it doesn't really matter to him that he's in harm's way. I mean, he suffers from PTSD, and it's obviously there's some trauma involved in what he's doing, but he has that sense of purpose and loves what he does. So again, I don't think it's necessarily the job being difficult. I think if you have that purpose and you love what you do, then that's enough, isn't it?
Yes. And some would argue if you're in that situation, you don't even need to get paid for it. So,
yeah. Well, and then you want people who volunteer.
Absolutely.
So lots of people who don't need the income will volunteer and might do it as a side hustle volunteering, but they have that sense of purpose that drives them to do something for the good of others, and they don't need to be paid for it.
So I think when someone comes into the coaching room, they may not necessarily outright say, I need to find more meaning in my life, but they might say something else like, I used to love my job, or life's just a bit boring or mundane, or they might say something else that could...
Yeah, I think quite often it's not having a sense of direction, that they're languishing a little bit.
That's a really good word to use. Yeah.
I think that's something to recognise in a coachee, that they're just a bit lost, don't know where they want to go.
Because there's this idea, and it's reflected in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it, that initially we might be need for food and shelter and security, and once we've established that and we're okay with that, it's like there's something else that as humans we need to fulfil.
Yeah.
And for some people, for some of the time, that might be focusing on their career, or it might be raising a family or something else. And then when perhaps they've done that, or they've achieved what they want to achieve, maybe the children have become more independent, they could again feel like there's a missing part.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where that directionlessness comes in, or something missing.
Yeah, and or the whole humanistic movement, as you look at Carl Rogers and, like you say, Maslow, has that idea that we have that self-actualizing tendency, that we want to move on to something more, that we want to continue to improve and be our best selves. And sometimes if we're trapped in something that we're not enjoying and not engaging with, then that can feel quite limiting. But we might have to do a lot of work on ourselves to find out what it is that we are wanting to move on to.
Yeah, and that's where coaching can help.
Yeah. And I think there are people, and they're probably not the people that would come to coaching, who don't have that generative spirit, that they're happy to just meander through life and don't feel they need a sense of meaning. They're just, happy to go to work in a boring job and come home at the end of the day and do something else. Do you know, they're just drifting through life, but they're probably not the people that are going to come to coaching.
So someone comes to the coaching room and they've mentioned some of these things that we've talked about, perhaps feeling directionless. We've perhaps identified that meaning and purpose could be the missing piece. Where would you start?
We might take a positive psychology approach, and if we think of the 3 different lives that Martin Seligman suggests that we might lead. So we might have that pleasant life where things are just, we're quite happy, we're ticking along, we're enjoying life, we're having joyous moments in our day. And that might be okay for a while. And that tends to be a youthful thing that we just enjoy ourselves. But then we might get into a role where we're actually engaged in our role, and we have flow in our day, so that might be something that we engage with. So we're quite happy in that, But then if we're beyond that, we do want some meaning, then I think we have to start to explore what would actually give us meaning. But I think for a lot of people, if we can explore what they do on a day-to-day basis in their work life, if that's where the drift is, if it's a workplace thing, actually thinking about what parts of their job they get into that flow state in, when they can really just be engaged at work and come away feeling like they've done a good job. So that can be really useful. And say, if we move beyond that, it might be that they're doing a job they quite enjoy, but they don't really understand the purpose of that job. So that, again, might be something that we explore with them. What is the ultimate purpose? So if you're making widgets every day, I mean, I'm not sure that you'd be in flow making widgets, but you might be. But if you're making widgets every day, but you've got no idea what the end use of those widgets are, you might not have a great sense of purpose about it. But if you knew those widgets were going into heart valves, something that had an ultimate impact on the world, then you might feel... It's that old story, isn't it, of Kennedy visiting NASA during the space race of the 60s and going down the line of astronauts, engineers, finally coming to the end of the line, being introduced to Joe Spivey, who was the caretaker. And he was shaking hands with him. He's standing there with a mop, and Kennedy's saying, "What is it you do here?" And he said, "I'm helping to put a man on the moon." So there's someone who's actually engaging with the ultimate purpose of the organisation, and he's part of that. And I think organisations can go a long way to helping people to understand their purpose by connecting them with the end result of what it is they do. So I think that's, again, something else. It's just taking a different perspective on it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Looking for where the purpose sits in what it is that they do. Now, we work with doctors. Most of them have a sense of purpose in that respect. So they understand that the work they do is doing good. They're having an impact on the health of those that they help. But that might still not be enough, that they might feel that they're languishing still. So then it's about future visioning. It's okay, well, let's look ahead. Where do you want to be?
And of course, some of our doctors who've been through our coach training may well be coaching people who aren't doctors. So they'll be looking for that purpose. And visioning is a great way of exploring that. I think values as well can help point us in the direction of what we feel is important and what we feel is meaningful. So for me, I think if you're in alignment with your values and you're living your values, so they are present and show up in your life daily, if possible, you almost by default will find yourself in a meaningful life, a purposeful way of living.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I think for me, values are make the life that you're living make sense. So there's some cohesion to the way that you're living your life there. But it doesn't necessarily provide the purpose. So there was some research done where they looked at meaning in life. Two ladies, I can't remember their name now, but they looked at what made up purpose. So meaning was one of them. Cohesion was another, so it made sense in terms of their own lives, their values and everything about them, that it made sense. But also significance. So that's like having an impact as well. So I think those three things, which is where I've got to with the phrase meaningful purpose, because I think purpose and meaning perhaps are a bit disconnected, but if we bring them together and have meaningful purpose, because purpose comes sometimes within an occupation, a goal, organisation, it could be goal setting. Well, we have this goal as an organisation, we've got to hit this target by next week or next year. So that could be a purpose, we've got to do that. But it might not be meaningful for you. So I think for people we're coaching is finding that meaningful purpose. What's the meaning in the purpose?
Yes.
That you're working towards. And I think that's a good place to start. And Simon Sinek's coming to mind. And the whole start with why. And his idea that everyone knows what they do. Everyone knows how they do it. But very few people know why they do it. And you would hope that the doctors know why they do it, but there might be that disconnect for them about what their meaningful purpose is in the purpose that they're serving. What is it for them? And I think that can be a really deep and interesting conversation.
I think also sometimes we can find some meaning in not just the things that we are passionate about, but the reverse, if you like, the things that we get frustrated by, because perhaps they indicate something that we'd like to change in the world.
Yeah.
And so some people will find their meaning in the thing that grates, because if they can go out and make that grate less and make a difference in that way, they'll feel that they have done well in their lives, and it will have had meaning.
If we think about what's going on in this country at the moment in terms of the medical profession, so you've got junior doctors who are out protesting and going on strike. Although they are people who are finding meaningful purpose in taking strike action in order to get things changed.
Yeah.
So they feel strongly enough that they're ready to stand on a picket line and protest. And I think that's true for a lot of people that get involved in movements. That's where they find some meaningful purpose. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's struggling with events in the world and was saying, I just find myself watching the news and it's really depressing me and I'm really angry and there's nothing I can do. And I said, well, is there nothing? Is that true? But he was trapped in that negative thinking about the world and frustrated by the way the world is moving, but didn't feel that anything he did was going to be irrelevant, which is a bit sad place to be, isn't it? But for a lot of people, they will be out there protesting, they will be making their voice heard, and they'll be trying to change things, which gives them a sense of meaningful purpose.
Yeah, so many things that we take for granted now have only come about because people have taken to the streets and made their voice heard, something they felt angry about or passionate about. Yeah.
So again, we're moving away a little bit from occupation as that Venn diagram. It's not necessarily about that. So it could well be about other aspects of your life that give you meaning. It could be, if you go back to, I just remember in my early working life, I used to come across people who worked in factories and they hated their jobs. They were on a production line and just saying boring job every day. But they did, pigeon fancying or that sort of grew chrysanthemums. There was something going on. So they'd do their day job, get it over with, and then they'd go and do what they really enjoyed doing. And they got some sense of meaning and purpose from that. And if we think about where we started with Ikigai, that whole concept of finding your reason for being is not necessarily about the work you do. It could be about something else in your life. So it could be your granddaughter. It could be a pastime that you do, a hobby. It could be making a podcast.
It could be training doctors.
It could be training doctors.
Absolutely.
We're very lucky, actually, I think, going back to the Venn diagram, that we love what we do in terms of training doctors. I think we're good at it.
Yeah,
I think we're very good at it, actually. I think it's what the world needs. I think more doctors would benefit from having some coaching training. And we make a little bit of money out of it. So, it's good. I think that's probably enough on Meaningful Purpose for today.
Yeah.
It's maybe something we might revisit in the future. But I hope that's given coaches a good taste of how they might work with someone around their meaningful purpose.
Yes, because I think it can feel like quite a nebulous topic, can't it?
Yes.
So just having a few things that perhaps you could focus in on that we've talked about today is really useful.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Helen. Next time we will be...
So next time on the podcast, we've got some listeners' questions that we're going to answer. You like answering questions, don't you?
Well, it lets me know people are listening. If they've got some questions, it shows they have an interest.
Yeah.
So it's strange talking to the world, isn't it, without anyone responding. So
it is.
It's great when we get some questions in that we can provide some answers to. So we look forward to that. So
Excellent.
Thank you for today, Helen.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.